The Pacific Ocean has a way of making you feel small. I've spent 22 years staring at these waters from the deck of cutters, through night vision goggles, from helicopter doors, and they still humble me. Tonight, 180 nautical miles southwest of San Diego, the sea stretched black and endless beneath a moonless sky. Perfect conditions for ghosts, and that's exactly what we were hunting. Commander Wheeler, we've got updated coordinates from JIETF South. I turned from the bridge window to face Lieutenant Jessica Reyes, my intelligence officer. At 31, she was one of the sharpest analysts I'd ever worked with, the kind of mind that could piece together cartel shipping patterns the way others solve crossword puzzles. "Show me," I said. She handed me the tablet. The screen glowed with a satellite overlay of the Eastern Pacific, and there it was, a tiny red dot moving northeast at approximately 8 knots. They're calling it Target Lazarus. Reyes continued, semi-submersible, approximately 60 feet in length. DEA estimates it's carrying between 15 and 18 metric tons of pure cocaine. I did the math in my head. Street value? Somewhere north of $2 billion, maybe closer to 3, depending on how it was cut and distributed. "That's not a shipment," I muttered. "That's an entire cartel's quarterly budget." "Yes, sir, and that's exactly why this one matters." I set the tablet down and looked around the Combat Information Center of the USCGC steadfast. My team, 12 of the most capable men and women in the Coast Guard Special Operations community, were running final equipment checks, reviewing approach vectors, studying the thermal imaging feeds coming in from our MH-65 Dolphin helicopter circling 20 miles ahead. These were the moments that defined us. Not the medals, not the press conferences, not the handshakes from politicians who couldn't find the Pacific on a map. This, the darkness before contact, the weight of knowing that in a few hours people might die. "What do we know about the crew?" I asked. Reyes pulled up another file. "Based on previous interdictions of similar vessels, we estimate 3 to 4 operators. Colombian nationals, most likely. Experienced mariners. These guys don't hand the keys to a $2 billion submarine to amateurs." I nodded. That was the cruel irony of this work. The men piloting that submarine weren't cartel bosses. They weren't the ones who'd ordered the executions, corrupted the governments, destroyed the families. They were fishermen, former sailors, men desperate enough to spend a week sealed inside a fiberglass coffin for the promise of enough money to change their lives. It didn't make them innocent, but it made them human. "Commander," the voice came from Chief Petty Officer Daniel Torres, my senior boarding officer. He was built like a refrigerator and had hands that could palm a basketball, but his eyes carried the quiet intelligence of a man who'd seen too much to be impressed by anything. "Chief, birds got visual. Confirmed target is running with minimal surface exposure, maybe 18 inches of freeboard. She's riding low, sir, really low." That meant she was fully loaded, maximum cargo, minimum visibility. These narco submarines were engineering marvels in the worst possible way, designed specifically to evade radar, slip beneath the waves, and deliver poison to our shores. I checked my watch, 0347 hours. We had roughly 3 hours until sunrise, and these operations always went better in the dark. "All right," I said, loud enough for the room to hear. "Listen up." The chatter stopped. 12 pairs of eyes locked on to mine. "Here's what we know. Target Lazarus is carrying enough cocaine to supply every major city on the West Coast for months. Intel suggests this shipment belongs to the Guerrero-Sinaloa Federation, and if we take it down, we're not just making a seizure, we're delivering a message." I paused, letting that sink in. "But I want to be clear about something. Our objective is interdiction and apprehension. We are not at war with the men on that submarine. We give them every opportunity to surrender. Every opportunity. Clear? Clear, sir, came the unified response. Good, Chief Torres. I want your boarding team ready in 15. Reyes, keep feeding me updates on her heading. And someone get Commander Davis on the horn. I want that helicopter in position for illumination on my mark. The room exploded into controlled activity. I stepped out onto the weather deck, letting the salt air fill my lungs. The Steadfast was cutting through the swells at 22 knots, her hull shuddering with each impact. Somewhere out there, maybe 20 miles ahead, 4 men sat in the cramped darkness of a vessel that was never meant to surface, carrying a cargo that would destroy countless lives if it reached its destination. My phone buzzed. A text from my wife, "Can't sleep, be safe out there, I love you." I typed back, "Always, love you too." Then I silenced the phone and went back to work. The first visual confirmation came at 0412. Contact bearing 035. Range approximately 2 nautical miles. The radar operator called out. Speed has decreased to 6 knots. She may be aware of our presence. Or she's preparing to dive, Torres added grimly. That was the nightmare scenario. These semi-submersibles could ballast down in minutes, slipping beneath the surface where our helicopters couldn't see them, where our radar couldn't track them. If she went deep, we might lose her forever. Increase speed to maximum, I ordered, and get that helicopter in close. I want eyes on her now. The Steadfast surged forward, her engines roaring. Through my binoculars, I scanned the black horizon, searching for any break in the monotony of waves and darkness. Then I saw it, a shadow, low and long and impossibly still against the churning sea. No running lights, no silhouette above the waterline, just the faintest disturbance, like a whale breaking the surface to breathe. Target acquired, I said quietly. All units, this is Commander Wheeler. We have visual on target Lazarus. Prepare for interdiction. The helicopter swept in from the north, its spotlight cutting through the night like a blade. The beam found the submarine instantly, illuminating a shape that looked less like a vessel and more like a coffin made of fiberglass. In desperation, for a moment, nothing happened. Then the submarine began to move. She's running, Torres shouted. Target is attempting to evade. Stay on her, I commanded. Do not lose visual. Boarding team, prepare for wet insertion. The next few minutes were chaos organized, rehearsed chaos, but chaos nonetheless. The helicopter tracked the submarine as it zigzagged through the swells, its primitive diesel engine coughing against the weight of its cargo. Our rigid-hulled inflatable boats hit the water with practiced precision, racing toward the target with Torres and 6 operators aboard. I watched from the bridge, my knuckles white against the railing. Commander, she's starting to ballast down, Reyes reported. They're trying to scuttle. Negative, I said. They don't scuttle with cargo this valuable. They're bluffing. But even as I said it, I saw the submarine's bow beginning to dip. Water was flooding into her ballast tanks, dragging her down inch by inch. Torres, you've got maybe 90 seconds before she goes under. Get on that boat. Copy that, Commander. We're going in. Through the spotlight's glare, I watched my team approach the submarine. Torres was the first to leap, landing on the wet fiberglass hull with the grace of a man half his age. 2 more operators followed, their weapons trained on the submarine's single hatch. Then the hatch opened. A hand emerged, followed by an arm, followed by a man in a ragged t-shirt with terror in his eyes. He was young, maybe 25, and he was shouting something in Spanish that the wind carried away. No disparin, mirindo. Don't shoot. I surrender. Torres grabbed him by the collar, and hauled him onto the hull, securing his wrists with zip ties in a single fluid motion. One by one, 3 more men emerged from the submarine's belly. They came out blinking and gasping, their skin pale from days without sunlight, their hands raised in universal surrender. All suspects secured, Torres reported. Commander, you need to see this. I boarded the submarine 15 minutes later. The smell hit me first, diesel fuel, human sweat, and something chemical and bitter that I couldn't identify. The interior was barely wider than my shoulders, a claustrophobic tunnel of exposed wires and crude welds. Water sloshed around my boots as I made my way aft, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. And then I saw the cargo, brick after brick after brick of compressed cocaine, wrapped in black plastic and stamped with a logo I recognized from 100 intelligence briefings, a scorpion with its tail raised to strike. Guerrero Sinaloa Federation, Reyes confirmed over my earpiece. This is definitely their shipment. I stood there for a long moment, trying to comprehend the scale of what we'd intercepted. Each brick weighed roughly 1 kilogram. There were thousands of them, stacked from floor to ceiling, filling every available inch of the submarine's cargo hold. $2 billion. Maybe more. In that moment, I felt something I rarely allowed myself to feel: pride. Not for myself, but for my team. For the system. For the countless hours of intelligence, work, and training and sacrifice that had brought us to this exact moment. But I also felt something else: unease, because I knew what came next. I knew that somewhere in Mexico, in a fortified compound surrounded by armed men, a phone was about to ring, and when it did, the person who answered would learn that their empire had just suffered a catastrophic blow, and they would want revenge. Commander, Torres said, appearing at my shoulder, what do we do with her? I looked around the submarine one last time, and she was taking on water now, her hull groaning under the strain of damage from our boarding. She's not seaworthy, I said, and she's evidence. We could tow her in. No, I shook my head. Too risky, too slow. We document everything, extract the cargo, and let her sink. Torres nodded. And the crew? They're in custody. They'll be processed, extradited, tried. I paused. They'll probably give us everything they know in exchange for a lighter sentence. You think they know anything worth knowing? I thought about the men we'd pulled from the submarine, their hollow eyes, their trembling hands, their desperate pleas for mercy. They know who paid them, I said. They know where they loaded, and they know how scared they were, not of us, but of what would happen if they failed. I climbed out of the submarine and stood on her sinking hull, watching the Pacific slowly reclaim her. By dawn, Target Lazarus would be nothing more than debris scattered across the ocean floor. But the ripples from this night, those would spread for months. Sinaloa, Mexico, 72 hours later. The news reached Alejandro Fuentes Vega at exactly 6:47 a.m. while he was eating breakfast with his youngest daughter. She was 7 years old, Maria Elena, and she'd been telling him about a dream she'd had, something involving horses and a castle and a princess who could fly. Alejandro listened with the patient attention of a devoted father, nodding at the right moments, asking questions that made her giggle. Then his phone rang. The number on the screen made his stomach clench. He excused himself from the table, kissed Maria Elena on the forehead, and walked to his study with measured steps. "Tell me," he said. The voice on the other end belonged to Rodrigo Salazar, his head of operations. And Rodrigo sounded like a man who expected to die for delivering bad news. The submarine is gone, the cargo is gone, the crew is in American custody. Alejandro said nothing. Don Alejandro, How? Coast Guard, they were waiting for it. Someone knew the route, the timing, everything. Alejandro sat down in his leather chair and stared at the wall. On it hung a photograph of his father, the man who had built this empire from nothing, from a single marijuana field in the mountains of Durango to a multinational operation that moved billions of dollars worth of product every year. And now, in a single night, a significant portion of that legacy had sunk to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. $2 billion, Alejandro said quietly. Do you understand what that means, Rodrigo? Yes, Don Alejandro. Do you understand that I have debts to pay? Partners who expected their share? Soldiers who need to be fed? Yes, Don Alejandro. Then tell me something useful. Tell me who is responsible. There was a long pause. When Rodrigo spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. We're working on it. Our people inside the DEA say the operation was run by a Coast Guard commander named Wheeler, Marcus Wheeler. He's based out of San Diego. Alejandro committed the name to memory, Marcus Wheeler. Find out everything about him, Alejandro said. His family, his friends, his weaknesses. Everything. And then Alejandro looked at the photograph of his father again. The old man's eyes seemed to bore into him, demanding action, demanding strength, demanding the kind of ruthlessness that had kept the Fuentes Vega family at the top of this bloody pyramid for 3 generations. And then Alejandro said, we send a message. San Diego, California, present day. I found out they were hunting me on a Tuesday. It started with a call from Special Agent Patricia Vance, my liaison at the DEA. Pat was a former Marine who'd spent 15 years working undercover in some of the most dangerous places on Earth, and she didn't scare easily. But that morning, her voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. Marcus, we need to talk, not over the phone. Can you meet me at the usual spot in an hour? The usual spot was a diner in National City, the kind of place where the coffee was bad, but the booths were private. I arrived early and took a seat facing the door, old habits from a lifetime of operational security. Pat walked in at exactly 10 a.m. She was wearing civilian clothes, jeans, a blazer, sunglasses that she didn't remove even inside, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Thanks for coming, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. You sounded worried. That worries me. She pulled out a manila folder and slid it across the table. 3 days ago, we intercepted communications from the Guerrero-Sinaloa Federation. They're looking for someone. They're always looking for someone. They're looking for you, Marcus. I opened the folder. Inside were printouts of intercepted messages, some in Spanish, some translated along with photographs and surveillance reports. My name appeared on nearly every page. Wheeler. Find him. Make an example. The American who sank our shipment. He has a family. Use them. No mercy. No negotiation. Kill everyone he loves. I read the messages twice, then closed the folder. How solid is this intelligence? Solid enough that I'm here, Pat said. We've got sources inside the cartel, multiple sources. They all say the same thing. Alejandro Fuentes Vega has made you his personal priority. I knew the name. Fuentes Vega was the current head of the Guerrero-Sinaloa Federation, a man who'd inherited his position from his father and consolidated it through a combination of business acumen and spectacular violence. Intelligence reports estimated his organization was responsible for over 60% of the cocaine entering the United States through Pacific routes. And I had just cost him $2 billion. What are they planning? I asked. We don't know specifics yet. But Marcus, they mentioned your family, Sarah, the kids. Something cold settled in my chest. I'd always known this work carried risks for me. I'd accepted those risks decades ago, made peace with the possibility that I might not come home from any given mission. But Sarah, my children? I need protection for them, I said. 24/7 surveillance, a security detail, the works. Already in motion, we're coordinating with the marshals and local PD. But Marcus, Pat hesitated. You might want to consider relocating them temporarily. Sarah won't agree to that. Then make her agree. These people don't play by rules, Marcus. They don't care about collateral damage. If they can't get to you, they'll go after the people you love just to make a point. I stared out the window at the parking lot, at the ordinary people living their ordinary lives, unaware of the shadow war being fought all around them. I need to talk to my family, I said. Do it today. And Marcus, Pat leaned forward, her eyes finally visible behind her sunglasses. They were bloodshot and haunted. Watch your back. These bastards have people everywhere. I drove home in a daze. Our house was a modest 3-bedroom in Chula Vista, the kind of place where neighbors waved and kids played in the streets and nobody locked their doors during the day. Sarah and I had bought it 12 years ago when I'd first been stationed in San Diego. We'd raised 2 children within its walls, Emma, now 16, and Michael, 12. It was supposed to be our safe place, our refuge from the chaos of my work. Now, it felt like a target. Sarah was in the kitchen when I walked in, preparing dinner. She looked up with a smile that faded the moment she saw my face. Marcus, what's wrong? I told her everything. The submarine, the seizure, the cartel's response, the threats. I watched her expression shift from confusion to fear to something harder, a resolve that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with her in the first place. How serious is this? She asked when I finished. Serious enough that the DEA is recommending we relocate. Relocate where? I don't know yet. They're working on options. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. She stood at the kitchen counter, her hands flat against the granite, her eyes fixed on some point beyond the walls of our home. The kids, she said finally. Do they know? Not yet. We need to tell them. I know. Tonight. Yes. She looked at me then, and I saw tears forming in her eyes, not from fear, but from anger, from the unfairness of it all. You were doing your job, she said. You were protecting people, and now we're being punished for it. I know, I said again. It was all I could say. This isn't right, Marcus. No, it isn't. She came around the counter and wrapped her arms around me, holding tight, her head against my chest. I held her back, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the warmth of her body against mine. We'll get through this, she whispered. Together. Together, I agreed. But even as I said it, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. That night, I told my children that we might need to move. Emma reacted the way I expected, with anger, with denial, with accusations that I was ruining her life. She was 16 and everything was a catastrophe, and now her father was telling her she might have to leave her friends, her school, her entire world because of something that had nothing to do with her. This isn't fair, she shouted. Why do we have to pay for what you did? Emma. No, you could have let them go. You could have looked the other way, but you had to be the hero, didn't you? You had to be the great Commander Wheeler. She stormed off to her room, slamming the door behind her. Michael, younger and quieter, stayed at the table. He looked at me with eyes that seemed far too old for 12. Are we in danger, Dad? I wanted to lie. I wanted to tell him that everything would be fine, that Daddy would protect him, that bad things only happened to other people, but I couldn't. Yes, I said, we might be. That's why we need to take precautions. Like moving, maybe, or having some people keep an eye on us for a while. Michael nodded slowly. Is it because of the drugs? The submarine you sank? How do you know about that? It was on the news. Jake showed me at school. He paused. They said you were a hero. I reached across the table and put my hand on his shoulder. I was just doing my job, buddy, that's all. But you stopped the bad guys, right? You kept the drugs from getting to people. Yeah, we did. Michael considered this. Then he looked up at me with something like pride in his eyes. Then it was worth it, he said. Even if we have to move, it was worth it. I pulled him into a hug and held him tight, hoping he couldn't feel the way my hands were trembling. 2 weeks later, the first incident happened at Sarah's school. She taught third grade at Eastlake Elementary, had done so for almost a decade. It was her calling, she always said, shaping young minds, watching children discover the joy of reading and math and creativity. She loved those kids like they were her own. On a Wednesday afternoon, she noticed a black SUV parked across the street from the school. It wasn't unusual in itself. Parents often arrived early for pickup, but something about this vehicle felt wrong. The windows were tinted too dark. The engine was running, and it stayed there for over 2 hours without anyone getting in or out. Sarah called me. It's probably nothing, she said, but you told me to trust my instincts. Stay inside. I'm sending someone. The SUV was gone by the time the security team arrived. We never found out who was inside or what they were doing there, but we all knew. The second incident was more direct. Michael's soccer coach received an anonymous phone call asking for detailed information about the Wheeler family's schedule. The coach, a retired firefighter named Ray Gonzalez, had enough sense to refuse and report the call to us immediately. They knew my name. Ray told me, his face pale. They knew where I worked, where I lived. They said they just wanted to talk. But Marcus, the way they said it. I thanked Ray for his courage and added his name to the list of people we needed to protect. The list was getting long. The third incident nearly killed me. I was driving home from Sector San Diego, taking my usual route down Palm Avenue, when I noticed a white panel van following me. It had been behind me for at least 3 miles, matching my speed, keeping a constant distance. Training took over. I made a series of random turns, left on Hollister, right on Main, another left onto a side street I'd never taken before. The van followed every turn. I reached for my phone to call for backup, but before I could dial, the van accelerated. It closed the distance between us in seconds, pulling alongside my SUV on the narrow road. I saw the window roll down. I saw the barrel of a gun. I hit the brakes and threw myself sideways just as the first shot shattered my driver's side window. Glass exploded across the interior. A second shot punched through the headrest where my head had been a moment earlier. A third went wide, embedding itself in the dashboard. I drew my service weapon and returned fire through the broken window, aiming for the van's tires. One shot connected, and the van swerved violently, jumping the curb and crashing into a parked car. I didn't wait to see if the occupants were alive. I floored the accelerator and drove straight to the nearest police station, where I spent the next 6 hours answering questions and giving statements. The shooters were never identified. The van was stolen. The guns were untraceable. But the message was clear. The cartel wasn't just threatening anymore. They were hunting. That night, I made a decision. I sat in my home office, surrounded by intelligence reports and threat assessments and photographs of the men who wanted me dead. Sarah was asleep or pretending to be, and the house was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic. I couldn't keep living like this. My family couldn't keep living like this. Every day that passed, the cartel got closer. They had money, resources, and an army of people willing to die for the chance to kill me. I was one man with a badge and a gun and the full weight of the U.S. government behind me. But even that might not be enough. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Yeah? The voice was gruff, suspicious. Jack, it's Marcus Wheeler. A pause. Then Wheeler, Jesus, I heard about the submarine. Hell of a grab. Jack Morrison had been my commanding officer during my first years with the MSRT before he'd retired and gone somewhere else, somewhere off the books. The kind of place where former special operations types went when they wanted to keep fighting but couldn't do it in uniform anymore. I need your help, I said. I figured. What's the situation? I told him everything, the threats, the surveillance, the attempted hit. I told him about Sarah and the kids, about the fear I saw in their eyes every morning. They're going to come again, I said, and next time they might not miss. So what do you want from me? I took a deep breath. I want to go on a fence. I want to hit them before they hit us. Another pause, longer this time. That's not exactly legal, Marcus. Neither is trying to assassinate a federal officer or threatening his family. Point taken. Jack was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear him thinking, you know who you're up against. Fuentes Vega isn't some street-level dealer. He's got an army. He's got cops, politicians, judges on his payroll. You go after him, you better be ready to finish it. I'm ready. Are you? Because if you do this, there's no going back. You'll be crossing lines that can't be uncrossed. I thought about Sarah, about Emma and Michael, about the life we'd built and the future I wanted for them. I'm ready, I said again. All right? Jack's voice hardened with purpose. I'll make some calls. We'll need people, good people, people who know how to work off the grid, and we'll need intel, real intel, not the sanitized stuff your agency gives you. I can get that. Then start getting it. I'll be in touch. The line went dead. I sat in the darkness of my office, staring at the phone in my hand. I had just crossed the first line, asked for help outside official channels, admitted I was willing to operate beyond the law. There would be more lines to cross before this was over. But as I thought about my children sleeping in their beds, about Sarah lying awake in our room, about the faceless men who wanted to destroy everything I loved, I knew I would cross them all. 3 days later, Jack Morrison arrived in San Diego with 3 other men. I met them at a safe house in Otay Mesa, a nondescript warehouse that had been used for various classified operations over the years. Jack looked older than I remembered, grayer, more weathered, but his eyes still carried the same intensity I'd respected during my early years. Marcus, he said, gripping my hand, you look like hell. Feel like it too. He introduced his team, Rodriguez, a former Navy SEAL who specialized in direct action, Chen, an ex-CIA analyst who could find anyone anywhere, and Vasquez, a woman who didn't share her background but moved like someone who'd spent a lifetime in shadows. We've done our homework, Jack said, spreading documents across a table. Fuentes Vega runs a tight ship, but he's not invincible. He's got vulnerabilities like anyone else, such as his money. Chen stepped forward, pulling up files on a laptop. The Guerrero-Sinaloa Federation moves cash through a network of shell companies, real estate investments, and cryptocurrency exchanges. We've identified 3 key nodes in that network, take them out, and you don't just hurt him financially. You cripple his ability to pay his soldiers, his suppliers, his corrupt officials. How do we take them out? Legally, you freeze their assets, launch investigations, build cases that take years to prosecute. Chen smiled grimly. Less legally, we hit the physical locations where the cash is stored. We burn their accounts, expose their networks, make it impossible for them to do business. I looked at Jack. That's a lot of exposure, a lot of risk. Yes, but it sends a message. You're not the only one who can hunt. Vasquez spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm, measured, almost clinical. There's another vulnerability. Fuentes Vega has family, a wife, 3 children, an elderly mother. He keeps them isolated for their own protection, but he visits regularly. Predictable patterns. No, I said immediately. We don't touch civilians. We don't become them. I wasn't suggesting we touch them. I'm suggesting we watch them. Follow the patterns. They'll lead us to Fuentes Vega himself. And then she met my eyes without flinching. And then we make sure he can never threaten your family again. I let that hang in the air for a moment. There has to be another way, I said. Something that doesn't involve assassination. There is, Jack said. We gather evidence. We document his operations, his contacts, his crimes. We build a case so airtight that even his bought judges can't dismiss it. Then we hand it to people we trust, journalists, prosecutors, international agencies, and we let the system do its work. That could take months. Yes, but it's sustainable. It's something you can live with when this is over. I thought about what Vasquez had suggested. Part of me, a dark part, a part I didn't like to acknowledge, wanted to take the quick route. Find Fuentes Vega, put a bullet in his head, end the threat forever. But I'd spent 22 years upholding the law, 22 years believing that the system, flawed as it was, still meant something. If I abandoned that now, what was left? We do it your way, I told Jack. We build the case. We expose him. We let justice handle the rest. Jack nodded slowly. That's the Marcus Wheeler I remember. But we also protect my family, whatever it takes. Understood. We spent the next 3 hours planning. Rodriguez would coordinate with my security detail, adding additional layers of protection. Chen would dig into the cartel's financial networks, looking for weaknesses we could exploit. Vasquez would monitor Fuentes Vega's movements, tracking his patterns without direct engagement. And I would keep doing my job, keep patrolling the waters, keep intercepting shipments, keep showing the cartel that they couldn't intimidate us into submission. It wasn't a perfect plan. It wasn't even a good plan, but it was something. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't just waiting to die. 6 months later, the case against Alejandro Fuentes Vega was built one piece at a time. Chen uncovered financial records linking the cartel to 17 different shell companies across 4 countries. Rodriguez coordinated with Mexican federal agents, ones we could trust, to document shipments, routes, and contacts. Vasquez tracked Fuentes Vega's movements with such precision that we knew his daily schedule better than his own security team. And the DEA, working through official channels, began building the legal framework that would bring him down. It was slow work, frustrating work. There were setbacks, informants who disappeared, evidence that was destroyed, witnesses who suddenly forgot what they'd seen. The cartel knew we were coming, and they fought back with every tool at their disposal. But we kept pushing. And then on a cold morning in February, we got the breakthrough we needed. His accountant flipped. Pat Vance delivered the news with barely contained excitement. We were in her office at the DEA field headquarters, surrounded by stacks of files and photographs and charts that covered every wall. Rafael Mendoza, she continued, 43 years old, been managing the Federation's finances for almost a decade. He's got records of everything, money transfers, bribes, purchases, everything, and he's agreed to testify. What does he want in return? Witness protection, new identity, new life, the whole package, plus immunity from prosecution for his own crimes. I nodded. It was a familiar deal. Give up the big fish, swim free yourself. Not ideal, but sometimes you had to accept imperfect justice. When can we move? That's the thing. Pat's expression darkened. Mendoza is scared, really scared. He says Fuentes Vega has people everywhere, including inside our agencies. He'll only surrender his evidence in person, on neutral ground, with guarantees that we can't be compromised. Where does he want to meet? a resort town called San Felipe down in Baja California. It's outside the cartel's primary territory, and Mendoza has contacts there who can ensure his safety. Baja California is still Mexico. I know, that's why we need someone he trusts to make the pickup. She looked at me significantly. Someone who's proven they can't be bought. I understood what she was asking. You want me to go into Mexico? I want you to bring back the evidence that takes down Alejandro Fuentes Vega. Everything we've worked for, Marcus, everything your family has sacrificed, it comes down to this. I thought about Sarah and the kids. They'd been living under protection for 6 months now, their lives constrained and controlled in ways that had taken a toll on all of us. Emma had stopped speaking to me entirely. Michael had nightmares. Sarah smiled less often, laughed rarely, looked over her shoulder constantly. If Mendoza's evidence was as good as Pat claimed, it could end all of that. It could give my family their lives back. When do I leave? San Felipe, Baja California, 3 days later. I crossed the border at Calexico and drove south through the desert, watching the landscape shift from California's scrubland to the stark beauty of Baja's interior. Jack had arranged for backup. Rodriguez and Vasquez would be nearby, monitoring communications, ready to extract me if things went wrong. But as I approached San Felipe, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The town was a fishing village turned tourist destination, all colorful buildings and beachfront restaurants and boats bobbing in the harbor. I found the hotel where Mendoza was staying, a modest place near the waterfront, and parked my rental car a block away. Then I waited. At exactly 7 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text. Room 214, come alone. I walked through the hotel lobby like any other tourist, taking the stairs to the second floor. The hallway was empty except for a cleaning cart abandoned near the elevator. I found room 214 and knocked twice. The door opened. Rafael Mendoza looked nothing like I expected. He was a small man, neatly dressed, with wire-rimmed glasses and the nervous energy of someone who'd spent his entire life looking over his shoulder. Commander Wheeler? He asked. That's right. Come in, quickly. The room was sparse, a bed, a desk, a television showing a Mexican news program. Mendoza had a briefcase on the bed, and he opened it as soon as I entered. Everything is here, he said, pulling out folders and hard drives and USB sticks. 15 years of financial records, account numbers, transaction logs, names of everyone Fuentes Vega has ever bribed or threatened or killed. This is enough to bring down not just him, but his entire organization. I examined the materials, flipping through documents I couldn't fully understand, but that looked legitimate. Why now, I asked. Why turn on him after all these years? Mendoza's face twisted with something like grief. Because he killed my brother, he said quietly. 3 months ago, my brother had nothing to do with the business. He was a school teacher in Guadalajara. But someone talked, and Fuentes Vega decided to send me a message. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just make sure his death means something. Mendoza closed the briefcase and pushed it toward me. Take this. Get it to your prosecutors. And Commander? Yes? Thank you for being someone I could trust. I never saw the men coming. One moment I was reaching for the briefcase. The next, the door exploded inward, and the room filled with bodies. 3 men, maybe 4, all armed, all moving with professional precision. I drew my weapon and fired twice, dropping the first attacker before he could raise his rifle, but the second was already on me, tackling me to the ground, driving his elbow into my throat. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see. I could only feel the weight of the man on top of me, crushing, suffocating. Then a gunshot close, impossibly loud, and the weight disappeared. I rolled sideways, gasping for air, and saw Mendoza standing over the fallen attacker with a smoking pistol in his hand. His face was pale, his hands shaking, but his eyes were clear. "Move," he said. "More are coming." We ran down the hallway, down the stairs, through the lobby, where terrified guests scattered before us, into the street, where Rodriguez was waiting with a running vehicle. "Go," I shouted. The SUV tore through San Felipe's narrow streets, bullets pinging off the reinforced exterior. I looked back and saw headlights pursuing us, 2 vehicles, maybe 3, closing fast. "Can you lose them?" I asked Rodriguez. "I can try." What followed was 15 minutes of controlled chaos, hairpin turns, near collisions, desperate maneuvers through roads that weren't meant for high-speed chases. But Rodriguez was good, maybe the best driver I'd ever seen, and gradually the pursuing vehicles fell behind. By the time we reached the border, they were gone. San Diego the next morning. The evidence Rafael Mendoza provided exceeded our highest expectations. Over the following weeks, federal prosecutors used it to file indictments against 47 individuals connected to the Guerrero-Sinaloa Federation. Bank accounts totaling hundreds of millions of dollars were frozen, properties were seized, corrupt officials at every level of Mexican government were exposed and arrested, and Alejandro Fuentes Vega, the man who had sworn to destroy me, was found dead in his compound, killed by his own lieutenants when it became clear that his empire was collapsing. The official report called it an internal dispute. Those of us who knew the truth understood it was something simpler: rats fleeing a sinking ship, turning on the captain to save themselves. I won't pretend it was justice. Not entirely. Too many people had died, too many families had been destroyed, too much poison had already reached American streets. The war against the cartels would continue long after I retired, long after my children grew up, probably long after my grandchildren were born. But for my family, at least, it was over. Epilogue 1 year later. I'm standing on the deck of a cabin in the mountains of Colorado, watching the sunset over peaks that have been here for millions of years and will be here for millions more. Sarah is inside making dinner. Emma is at college now, UC Berkeley, studying international relations, talking about joining the State Department. Michael is in the living room playing a video game with the enthusiasm of a kid who's finally allowed to be a kid again. We left San Diego 6 months ago. I took early retirement from the Coast Guard, accepted a consulting position with a private security firm that lets me work from home. It's not the life I planned, but it's a good life, a quiet life. Sometimes late at night, I still think about the men on that submarine, the ones we pulled from the water, blinking and terrified, surrendering to escape a coffin of their own making. I think about Rafael Mendoza, who sacrificed everything to bring down the man who killed his brother. I think about all the people whose names I'll never know, caught up in a conflict they never asked to be part of. And I think about the ocean, that vast, dark, indifferent expanse that held so many secrets. The war goes on. Somewhere tonight, another submarine is sliding through the Pacific, carrying another load of poison toward American shores. Somewhere, another commander is standing on the bridge of a cutter, staring into the darkness, preparing to do what has to be done. That's not my fight anymore. I've done my part, but I'll never forget it. The phone on the porch table buzzes. A text from Sarah. Dinner's ready. Stop brooding and come inside. I smile, take one last look at the mountains, and go to join my family.